it's an overall good pick for this dungeon in general.
Yeah, no question. These teams are getting ready. Of course, we've got Perplexed and Golden Guardians getting ready to face off here. Winner is going to be going up against Echo in the upper finals, while loser is going to be dropping down and facing elimination a little bit later today. So, lots going to be on the line for these teams. Each advancement through the bracket is more and more of our $300,000 prize pool that these teams are going to be scrapping and fighting for. Perplexed, Golden Guardians, game number 1 is getting started right now here in Mists.
I'm excited to see what they're going to do for their first pull, because we've seen a lot of differences in the first pulls of these dungeons from a decent amount of teams, whether or not you pull 1 or 2 of those Tyrannian villagers. Those mobs are pretty bad, but it is bolstering and necrotic, so over-pulling here can get super, super dangerous. And it looks like both groups are just only going to elect to pull 1 of the villagers, which I think it makes a lot of sense, especially since you're pulling in those spiteful... What are those mobs actually called? The leaping dog mobs.
The spite claws?
Spite claws,
yeah.
That's the name of them.
Yeah. They are,
Did you see that they...
cool. Good?
What were you going to say?
Well, they're pretty cool, because when they die, they explode, and they curse both allies and enemies with 10% damage taken increase. You could see it there on a lot of the players are perplexed for a second before it fell off. But you can actually use that to speed up the rest of the pull. When they do die and apply that damage done or damage taken increase to the enemies as well. So if you're careful, it can be a damage gain. A little bit harder to make good use of that on bolstering though, because you're trying to have everything die right around the same time to play around that affix. We do have a difference in compositions here between the teams as well, though. We have the Elemental Shaman, 1 copy of the Elemental Shaman in our 10 players here. It's on Perplexed side. Whereas on the Golden Guardians, they've elected to go with the Shadow Priest in that slot. And both teams are on triple ranged, as we talked about, just a slightly different take on triple ranged here between them, with the Elemental Shaman versus the Shadow Priest. My initial read of this would be that the Shadow Priest team should have more damage theoretically from the Shadow Priest, power infusions and stuff. But the Elemental Shaman should potentially be able to facilitate some bigger or safer pulls with the Ancestral Guidance healing that it provides. And those sorts of effects that it brings. I don't know. I mean, the two classes are pretty similar, though. They have a lot of the same strengths, so it makes sense that they're in that same slot.
I do think that, just at face value, I almost prefer the Shadow over the Ellie for this specific dungeon. And the reason for that is because it is bolstering, and so you do want a little bit more even of cleave. And on top of that, just being able to amp up the Fire Mage, it feels like that should be slightly better for a dungeon like Mists of Tyrannus Scythe, as opposed to having something that, at its face value, like the Elemental Shaman, will do more damage than Shadow Priest, or at least it should. And so it seems like the Shadow Priest team should have slightly more going for it, just in terms of group damage. But I think at the end of the day, execution is going to play the most pivotal role. I don't think the difference between Ellie versus Shadow is really that large here.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see whether it allows these teams to do something different than each other. Just on the face of it, though, it does look like Perplexed have found a couple seconds here in this first section, as they have pulled the boss first. Both teams, though, pumping some damage in here. There's going to be the Time Warp from Perplexed. They're firing off a little bit earlier than Golden Guardians are. Okay, Golden Guardians have it going as well now. And both teams, you can see the Ashen Hallows now coming down as well. Mm-hmm. All of these cooldowns are being used before they're actually in the damage phase, because they last so long, right? Bloodlust lasts for 45 seconds. Ashen Hallow lasts for 30 seconds. And so they will still get the full value here on this damage phase onto Ingram Alec, but they'll reach that phase faster. Oh, and there's a moon from a shine. There it goes. That's what you love to see. I don't think we saw one on the side of the Guardians, and Ingram Alec has been eliminated for Perplexed. On the side of the Guardians, Ingram Alec going to reach that 6% health mark before removing the damage taken increase. They will still be able to kill it before any sort of problems happen, but actually Perplexed gained a couple more seconds as a result of that going so well for them, as a result of the moon landing on the boss.
The Shine Gok really throwing on the trance music, pumping all the damage he possibly can. You do see both Golden Guardians and Perplexed are able to pull that pack over the wall, utilizing the Moon Can Flap. And like you said, Perplexed starting to open up a little bit more of a lead there, just off the back of having slightly more damage for that first boss. Oh, I wonder what route is through the maze this week.
I know that they got the mini boss that's the 3-headed plant hydra.
Okay, the bad one, the harder one rather.
The one that it shoots those poison globs on the ground.
Yes.
Dude, Perplexed did something really cool here. They actually let the Mistveil bite go through, which moved that lower health Stalker out of the pack for a bit, out of the AoE for a bit. Even though it does some damage with that bite, it let it then come back in and was pretty good for bolstering, because that mob naturally dies pretty fast. I think it has less health than its friends. Yeah, but they let it jump out of the pack with its bite, and I think that actually was a pretty clever move. That's something you don't usually see on the live servers, because the Stalker does so much damage with that bite. You usually want to stop it if you can. But I think that's a cool way to manage the bolstering affix. Perplexed, they are zooming through here. They're already into their third room of the maze here. This is a very... It's not like any of these pulls are going to wipe you because of a bolstering mismanagement, but you could easily gain or lose 5 or 10 seconds on each of these pulls as a result of doing the bolstering well. Because like you said, there are mobs with less health than everything else around them, like the Stalker. There are mobs with more health, like those Guardians, those Defenders, I think. And you really want to make sure that you're dealing damage proportional to how much health everything has.
And I think that's why we're seeing so few DKs and like Windwalker monks in this dungeon, because whenever you're playing like a DK or a Windwalker monk, what you want to do is facilitate larger pulls during the maze, and like use pets and chi burst and whatnot to actually double up on packs. But instead, with this triple ranged comp, you don't really have a lot of tools to be able to pull a bunch of packs outside of using potentially like trees to be able to like grab an additional pack on top of your normal pull. And I think it does make a lot of sense why both of these teams are running such similar comps. You do see something good happen on both sides though. Before the Pride is spawning, you do get a little bit of leeway in terms of how long you're out of combat, but you have to be out of combat to be able to activate the next route through the maze. So while the Pride is spawning, they're immediately hitting the portal, so they're able to move the Pride on top of that trash pack and just become really efficient that way.
Yeah, that kind of movement is really, really key, and it's one of the few ways that... Oh, no, Lip is down for Golden Guardians. He is their only... Actually, yeah, he's their only instant cast battle res as well, so with this Pride damage just coming out, they are going to be able to land the res on him, but this is a lot of extra pressure. Losing that time to cast that res as well is rough, and Shakib going down as well for the Guardians. They do finish off the Pride. That is the main source of danger in this pull over, but they are now going to have to finish this pull and then cast a long out-of-combat res before they're able... And it looks like actually Shakib is just elected to release instead of waiting that time to have the res go through. That, all that time with the Prideful buff as well would be such a huge cost. Looks like they do have a Mistveil Stalker though coming in on this. So yeah, they pulled over the wall into this Night Blossom. This is something that we saw, I think, out of Echo yesterday as well. That's a nice way to manage this. So I didn't catch if Perplexed did it as well, but it's a very efficient way to do this with bolstering, because the time while they're running there, you're doing effective damage to the high health mini boss anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, on top of that, you had those deaths there, but it's exactly what you were talking about. The strengths of the Elemental Shaman is that while they're pulling Pride into the trash packs, the Elemental Shaman team is going to keep his group a lot more safe. Just due to having AG. Obviously on this pull that they're doing with the Pride into that trash pack, he didn't have AG available to him, but that would just be the Holy Paladin's cooldowns coming in from Ryson. And now Perplex is on to Mistcaller, seemingly 30, 45 seconds ahead of where Golden Guardians are right now, Dratnos.
Yeah, it's so weird when you have an Elemental Shaman in a situation like this, where normally pulling trash onto a Pride makes it much more dangerous. But when you have Ancestral Guidance, it actually makes it a lot safer, because your Elemental Shaman, if they're hitting 5 targets with those Stormkeeper Chain Lightnings, and they have Ancestral Guidance up, every single time they press that button, it's just going to lay on hands your whole group. And that is, it makes the Pride much more manageable, ironically enough, when you do pull the trash on top of it. So yeah, Mistcaller is going to be the order of business here for Perplexed. Golden Guardians, though, having a little bit more trouble here as this Pride nearly takes them out. All their players sub 50% health as the Pride does eventually go down. They still have some mobs to take care of. Looks like a couple bolstering stacks on some of these mobs as well. So Yoda is going to be forced out of melee range and obligated to kite for a little bit.
Yeah, those are big bolster Guardians, unfortunately, for the Golden Guardians. But now they are on to Mistcaller. And they're like 65%, they're like 60 some odd percent behind where Perplexed is right now, this is bad news for them. I think, how are they going to be able to make up 60% on the boss? Because I don't think one-phasing this boss is doable on a 20. is Golden Guardians just hoping for a Perplexed mistake at this point?
Well, I mean, so I don't think there's much realistic hope of them beating this boss ahead of Perplexed. But there's
Correct.
still some time left in this dungeon, right? There's still the Trash Puller 2 and the last boss to take care of. So they don't have to make up all 60% now. They can make up 5 or 10% on this boss, and then, you know, another few seconds on the next Trash Pull, and then another lot of seconds somewhere else, and also something goes wrong for Perplexed a little bit. You know, if just a couple of things, maybe 5 or 6 things go slightly right for them, or one big mistake happens for Perplexed, then we're starting to get back into this one. But, I mean, you're right.
Bolstering too.
It's true. It is bolstering. And, okay, oh my goodness.
Oh, they just one-faced the boss!
Perplexed is... What on earth is
now they're
happening
making
to
a
that
U-turn.
boss?
Dude,
Yeah,
now
so
that,
this
okay,
is... Well, this is actually a faster way out of the maze, interestingly enough, than waiting for that RP. So this is a cool move by Perplexed, and it's about 2 seconds faster if you all mount up right after the boss and then run out the edge of the maze
they get
here.
slow fall. They're
And
gone.
with the slow fall, this is actually going to save them now 10 or 15 seconds relative to waiting for that wall to drop. The wall will be dropping right about now, and they are already down here getting this next trash pull. So very cool movement through the dungeon here from Perplexed. That's something that I expect you will see other teams starting to pick up as well, because it is certainly a time save to be doing this maneuver. And they are into their next big trash pull here. This will be spawning their 80% Pride, which I assume they'll be killing, and then going on to last boss, or maybe the next trash pull and a big trash pull up to like 99% trash after this, something like that.
It's 80% Pride, and then they'll pull like 9. Well, they can't pull trash into the boss, so
Right, they can't pull it onto the boss, but you get to like 99% trash with a big trash pull, and then you pull a larva into the end of the boss or whatever. Yeah. Let's see how this goes. So, yeah, fired up down for the Guardians as well on the Mistcaller fight. They do have their battle res returned, so they'll get him back up. That's another 5 seconds though on the board for them, and at this point, Perplexed are in a commanding lead. They are 20% ahead on trash, and they're working on their Pride already, whereas Golden Guardians still haven't quite finished off the boss. So all eyes now on Perplexed. It's going to be a question of if Perplexed can get through here without anything going too wrong. Divine is going to proc his last resort here on this Pride. That is step 1 of the 5-part Golden Guardians comeback plan. Is Divine losing his cheat death somewhere around here? So this is part of it, but there's going to need to be more happening wrong for Perplexed.
I love how you word that, the 5-part Golden Guardians come back.
It's not all in their hands at this point. They have the slow fall as well here, so they're coming down into the middle of this platform as well. They are on the same pull. So they're a pull and a Pride behind Perplexed at this point. Which,
where are they going?
You know, it's not. Oh, they're going the other side. This could be an opportunity for them to maybe shave a pull off the dungeon, depending on what this looks like, because this is a lot of Gorm that they are pulling together here. And I think they actually still have enough kicks here, because I think there's only 2 of the Staghorns that require 2 interrupts each. Yeah. So this should be okay for the Guardians. There you can see, wow, Shakib and Fired Up both kind of blasting off some damage here into this pull. Perplexed, though, 96% trash count. Tradova is going to be pulled by a Shine, who nearly gets meleeed by the boss, taunted just in time by Divine. Yeah, he's okay.
He would have lived anyways. He doesn't die.
That's true. Minkins have an unethical amount of armor.
Yoda really high stacks in Necrotic right now.
Yeah, he's in some jeopardy there. He's going to be forced to kite. Doesn't look like he has his Kyrian file available, but he does drop his stacks from kiting, and he's not getting back near those bolstered mobs anyways. He's not gonna risk taking an auto. They are spawning their 80% Pride, and the Guardians actually are up to 88% count here. That was a big pull.
That was a really good pull from them, but unfortunately, like you said earlier, I don't feel like everything is in their hands. On the other side, Perplexed already down to 67% on Tradova. We do know that they only need the few larvae to be able to kill off, for them to be able to get their 100% count. They do have Bloodlust popped right here, and they're just kind of ascending on the boss. That Elemental Shaman hitting a nice 7.6k DPS. Not to be outdone, Ryson at a nice balmy 8.5k, coming for that Moonkid's top spot.
Dude, if you looked at the damage and healing meters of some of these dungeons, you would assume there was a Resto Shaman and a Rep Paladin in these runs.
So Dratnos, it is one of the rules of the MDI that you must field 3 DPS and 1 healer. Little did we know that there was in fact a healer that counts as a DPS a lot of the time.
Yeah, these teams have 2 healers, 1 tank, and 4 DPS in a 5-person group. It's completely unfair.
This is truly unfair. They need a. It's very unfortunate. But Tridova's starting to drop really low here. The larva will be pulled in pretty late. They don't bolster or do any on-death affixes, so it's not super dangerous. But if you have like the Staghorn cast go off and that kind of thing, you don't really want Necrotic stacking up on your tank, so you would rather pull it in pretty late into Tridova here. So now the only thing that you really have to worry about is those kicks, because you are running kind of short on kicks here, but the advantage of the Ellie Shaman is that you have Wind Shear on a 12-second cooldown. That's an absolutely massive advantage because you do still have to kick the boss and just make sure that everything is being dealt with there. A Shine popping his Convoke, Tridova going to be falling here, and then they just have to finish up that one mob that will hit them with 100% enemy forces count. The Golden Guardians on the other side really close, but it is too little too late as Perplexed does take map 1.
That's right, Perplexed taking that victory. Not as quick of a finish as we've seen out of Echo, but very, very close on that one. They take that victory over Golden Guardians. They're up 1 here in the series, Zyro.
Yeah, and it's hard to really pinpoint what went wrong there for Golden Guardians, right? Because they didn't really have any major mistakes, right? There was like maybe one pull in the maze that kind of went wrong for them, but it didn't end up killing anyone, right? So it just looks like it was the Ellie Shaman difference. And if you look at the damage meters there, I mean, yeah, look, it's just more consistent overall damage by a lot. I mean, little more than 2k overall damage really makes the difference here.
Yeah, and I think that, we were talking about it a little bit before the match actually started coming up as well, Dratnos, about like how well some of these teams would be able to grab extra mobs out of the maze. And do you think it was something of like how aggressive one of the teams was going to be? Do you think it was just how they were lining up some of their CDs for it? What do you think that difference was?
So I think there was some clever bolstering management that let Perplexed save maybe 5 or 10 seconds on some of the earlier maze pulls. Golden Guardians did lose quite a bit of time when the later maze pulls went wrong for them. They did have some deaths there to the Prideful into those packs. I think that could be explained, though, by the Ellie Shaman versus the Shadow Priest, because the Ellie Shaman really does a great job of keeping your group alive through those difficult moments as long as there are multiple targets for them to be hitting AG off of. So, yeah, it's tough to say because I actually don't think Golden Guardians would have been that much more than, I think they would have been within a minute of that closing time at the end there. They had one more trash pull and the boss was at something like 15% for them when the timer stopped. So I think it would have been a really close game. And I mean, they did have 3 deaths on the board, each of which was a problem in its own right. I think that this would have been a close time, theoretically, if we had 0 death runs between the 2 teams.
I think a lot of Golden Guardians' time loss was that invisible time happening from bolstering, and I felt like their necrotic kiting made the packs get really sporadic during the maze. If they were able to just kind of plant and just bomb all of the damage, having those packs die before Yoda needed to run around frantically, that would have saved them 5 seconds here, 5 seconds there. That would have cut off a lot of the time as well. And then of course there's the tangible time losses from the deaths like Dratnos mentioned.
Now, what do you start thinking about that Ellie Shaman? We've been talking about it, pretty much all week here, Zyro, about where it's going to be good, where it won't be as strong or something like that. Interesting to see that there's a split here in this series. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a couple different things to talk about. I think the Ellie Shaman versus the Shadow Priest is a really big play here. The Ellie Shaman just brings more to the table in this dungeon, like we talked about before. And I think things like the Vengeance Demon Hunter having to kite around also comes back to the Ellie Shaman having more on-demand burst AoE damage, right? If the pack dies a little bit faster, your Vengeance doesn't have to get to the point where you have to kite, and none of those issues happen. But there is one other thing that I actually thought that was cool for McClip in the dungeon. It was really hard to find things in this dungeon because they did the same thing the entire time, but that tiny little skip after Mistcaller, I think we've covered it before, but it's kind of hard to see because the teams typically don't do it that often. After you kill Mistcaller, usually there's a little bit of RP that you have to wait for, but if you run around back to the side, you can actually just skip ahead to the rest of the dungeon, not have to worry about that RP. Saves you 5 to 10 seconds, but Perplexed takes a step further here. They slow fall the entire team with the mage. They run past, and they can start gathering up the trash right away instead of having to wait for RP and prison and run past that 3-pack. I like that. It's just a little bit of an extra time save.
The downside of this, the downside of that though, is that you're not really able to get the nut with any reasonable consistency. the group is probably going to be grouping the mobs, so there is time that you can unlock that checkpoint. But if anything goes wrong, nobody has a release point with it. Where were they even released? I think they released at the beginning of the maze.
They'd release at the beginning of the maze.
Yeah, the beginning of the maze. Yeah.
The plan is just not to die, right? You're taking
Exactly.
a higher risk, faster strategy. That's
If you're going into 15-minute mists clears and everything like that, you can't really be like spending extra time to be planning for that failure or anything like that. You just got to go, especially because you only have a handful of these like very large pulls that you're having to deal with there. So maybe it's something that you even ration a bit of your battle rests as well in case somebody dies like the maze and say, okay, just run back real quick in case we need it later on or something. But map 2 is going to be the other side on this one, Dratnos. What are we going to be looking at here? Tyrannical Bursting Explosive.
Yeah, so this is going to be a dungeon where we've seen teams play a lot of dwarfs, a lot of priests as well. I expect there will be several dwarfs and priests in both teams this time as well. That manages the bursting affix really nicely. Explosive also fairly easy affix to manage as well, which means that it's going to be a dungeon largely just based on how quick you can pull, how big you can pull, because these affixes aren't going to represent breaks that are stopping your progression in the way that, say, Bolstering and Necrotic did in Mists of Tyr Scythe. And it's going to be all about just getting that fastest possible theoretical time and then landing as close as you can to it. In particular, the section of this dungeon that goes the most consistently wrong is the 60% Prideful skip in the Mechagon wing. That's something that teams have something like a 50% success rate on. So if we see one team make that skip and one team fail it, there's a very strong chance that the team that successfully executes that skip is going to be the one that wins this map.
Yeah. It's very important. We've already seen some of the teams who are even coming back from killing Millhouse and Maleficent and everything like that, having to deal with it after the fact. We've just been seeing a number of those skips go awry. And, first and foremost, we saw from the beginning of the season as well, Titles, how teams were, kind of breaking between going left, going right, jumping all over the place, having some very different strategies early on. Now we've been seeing, a lot of the strategies coming a lot closer together with everybody focusing on Ardenweald first.
Yeah, I mean, Perplexed has always ran like really unconventional stuff in DOS, though. Even when everybody was going to the Ardenweald area first, Perplexed would seemingly still go to the Hakar area first. It's hard to tell like how much of a time gain stuff like that is until the routes start to converge at the very end, and it comes down to pride timings more often than not, where you're going to be gaining all of that time. But I think that typically going Ardenweald first makes a lot more sense because you still have all of your cooldowns up and you're able to go a little bit bigger. Like Dratno said we're going to be seeing a lot of dwarves for the bursting, and with a dwarf and a shadow priest, you're basically able to pull as large as you really want because bursting is an on-affix with double mass dispel is what that basically equates to. So yeah, I think that we are going to see a lot in both of these teams in this case go to that Ardenweald area first.
Yeah, and at this point, it's been interesting looking at some of the different affix combinations that we're looking at, especially some of the ones that'll be more mirrored towards live servers as well. Because in 905, I believe it was, Zyro, we were also seeing that nerf to Tyrannical. I guess it was just like a weekly hotfix as well. There's some of the changes to try to bring Tyrannical a little bit more closer to Fortified. And in a lot of cases, we've been seeing some of these bosses and how well these teams have prepared for the bosses to just absolutely melt them.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a nerf to Tyrannical, right? They nerfed it from, I believe it was 40% to 30% boss HP, but still, I mean, it's still a much more difficult and time-consuming affix than Fortified in most scenarios, right? So even with the slight nerf, these teams are still going to see a major challenge in making sure they deal with these bosses cleanly. And remember, we go up to 20 again, so it's going to be even more difficult for the teams.
That's right. Let's see what these teams got in store. As Perplexed is up 1 right now as we get the other side underway.
Alrighty, and immediately both teams leaping over that first pack of the dungeon and going all the way left here. They are pulling this Death Speaker pull and popping all of their offensive cooldowns. This seems really good because you do have what is 25 seconds of runtime after this into that area. So just blowing all of your CDs and then just you basically get free cooldown reduction because you don't have any trash to be able to kill. Golden Guardians get the slight edge at the first pull of the dungeon. They are just 3 or 4 seconds ahead just due to the optimizations of making sure that the mobs got grouped up just a little bit quicker and being able to allocate just slightly more damage.
Yeah, two teams here, both on the mirror composition with one slight difference, which is Wolf Disco playing the Dwarf and Fired Up playing the Dark Iron Dwarf. So a tiny little difference here. Otherwise, we have the exact mirror here between the two teams, as they are both going to be getting started here with this 20% trash pull once they get everything going here. Divine also is currently being attacked by a demon, which has been summoned by the Necrolord ability. So Divine choosing to play Necrolord in this dungeon, whereas Yoda is still on the Kyrian Covenant, which I would say the Kyrian one is the more standard pick. Necrolord does have some cool benefits, though, particularly the Amani Soulbind tree, letting you give your teammates primary stat, is something that represents a serious damage increase, potentially.
That was very scary from Perplexed. You saw that their bursting started to drop the whole entire group really low before you did have those dwarf rations coming out. I think one of the bigger advantages of the Kyrian, though, is the Kyrian file to be able to remove the bursting stacks. I think that's like one of the biggest things that Yoda can do that Divine can't. But I do believe that the Necrolord is slightly more damage, correct?
So, okay, one cool thing that Necrolord has as well is the bottom of the Ameni tree is a trait that gives you 3% haste for 10 seconds after you kill an enemy, up to 15%. It stacks up to 15%. So that's actually a tremendous amount of stat for a Soulbind ability if you have high uptime on it, which you do if you're killing stuff as frequently as these guys are. So that's something that is a little added benefit there for Divine's side. I think it is a slightly stronger Soulbind tree than Pelagos, which is what Yoda is running. But yeah, I think that on the whole, File of Serenity really strong. And of course, Elysian Decree is a huge amount of AoE damage and AoE threat, which
Explosive
is a nice benefit there. Yes, those explosives, they do die to basically one hit of almost anything. But you still have to tab to them, you still have to target them, and somebody does have to lose that damage of a global into them, which is not nothing.
Exactly. You have to commit some resources that you would otherwise be spending on like vamp touching or just meleeing a different mob potentially, and potential uptime of just... More often than not, it's going to be like the tank and the healer that are going to be dealing with most of the explosives, but say the explosive spawns far whenever these tanks are grouping packs of trash. One of the ranged DPS is going to have to dump something into them more often than not. Perplexed, it is starting to edge out a little bit more of a lead over Golden Guardians, just getting their packs dealt with slightly faster. And now this is a really dangerous pull here, Dratnus. They don't have a bunch of resources available to them to be able to deal with the bursting. They do have 3 of those dwarf racials actually up, but that's all that it looks like they have for them right now. Ryson, I can't tell if he has bubble or not. Maybe he would be able to bubble himself and then dispel Divine from the bursting. But this can be a really dangerous pull.
Especially because they're at 38% trash count, which means that after the first 2 mobs die here, they are going to have a Prideful spawn and start AoEing them as well. So this is going to be very important. They kill everything right at the same time here. Oh, a beautiful Demon proc for Divine is going to do a bunch of extra damage and heal him a bunch too. Necrolord ability coming in clutch there. It is unpredictable when those demons will spawn, but they got a very fortunate one at the end there, and you can see they've done a great job there of managing the bolstering affix and getting into this Pride here. But the Golden Guardians have lost very little time here as well. I think they've caught up a little bit to where Perplexed did as well. But Perplexed have done this pull right at the bottom near where the boss is, whereas Golden Guardians still have a little bit of movement to do as well. They've been moving while fighting this Pride, which does slow down the process of killing the Pride. Perplexed have just been planted down here this whole time. They've gotten their AMZ value right up against the ledge here where they're going to jump down and fight the boss. So we will get a timer now of what the difference is between these two teams. The boss pulled at 5:08 for Perplexed, whereas Guardians are still working on their Pride. Both teams at identical trash percentage, and it's going to be 5:20 that it is pulled for Golden Guardians, 5:22. So 14 seconds of difference here between these two teams. Perplexed are going to have 2 of their members just hanging out up there on this ledge. This is something that your ranged DPS players can do to mitigate the effects of several of the boss mechanics during this fight, but it means they aren't participating in that bouncing of the arcane lightning, which is a drawback.
It looks like Ryson hasn't popped his second Ashen Hollow of the dungeon yet. So you can look at the Golden Guardian side. JB did elect to use his second Ashen Hollow of the dungeon here, and Ryson, is his down now? I think he just used it. He used it really late, which is which is kind of strange. I wonder where he used the first one then, because it's assumed that JB used his on the first pull of the instance, which happened 20 seconds into the run or whatever. Whereas Ryson's, he held his so long into Dealer's Iexa, it made me wonder if he potentially used it on a trash pack, like the second trash pull of the instance as opposed to the first one like JB.
Dude, what is happening here? Golden Guardians are actually going to kill their boss half a second ahead of Perplexed.
It's the buck diff.
Despite pulling the boss 14 seconds later than Perplexed, they just blasted so much more DPS into that. That is incredible. I don't know where they found all this extra damage, but I mean, yeah, maybe it was just having all of everything multiplied together, used on pull all at the same time instead of delaying the hollow. So yeah, that might exactly have been what was going on. I don't think it's explained by that alone, though. I think that just their whole team, they're just reaching into some font of damage and pulling out something extra that nobody else seems to have access to, because they are consistently killing these bosses faster than anybody else.
Dratnus, if you asked them, they would tell you it's the buck diff. That is the only thing that they would respond with, though.
I mean, I believe it.
All right, so now they're all jumping with Slowfall, trying to make their way towards this Mechagon wing. The Golden Guardians getting there slightly faster, at least Yoda did, which is the best part. Like, if your tank is able to get there even before the rest of your DPS, the tank is able to get the mobs grouped up. But Perplexed and Golden Guardians are doing
here. Yeah, so Perplexed, Divine is going to
though.
meld. He's melding off the two big guys. Everybody's in combat with the small guys.
Big guys.
Yeah, the big guys were only in combat with Divine. So the big two warlords are going to be skipped here, and Perplexed is going to pull the 5 small mobs onto the dental drill. This is not something we've seen out of anybody before.
Okay.
And this is really, really cool way to save some. Oh my goodness, what are they doing? And they're now pulling in the Arf and the Headless Clients as well.
Okay.
This is such a dangerous combination of enemies to be fighting.
Watch Divine's HP. Divine is going to be the linchpin for a pull like this. The Arf, and all of those Bone Soldiers on top of him are very scary. You do see those Bone Soldiers are stacking up that disease on Divine. He does still have his cheat death effect. I think he has both of his cheat deaths actually up for him.
And he just stands there channeling Fleshcraft at them, and that is the power of the Necrolord Covenant coming in there for Divine. And the Demon Spawns as well explodes instantly to his Throwblade and heals him for a bunch of health as well. The Necrolord diff here coming in for Perplexed.
He is manning up.
They have made one pull out of this entire wing and its defenders outside. They're spawning their Pride in the tunnel. And there are the Invis pots as well. Let's see if this skip is executed successfully.
They're combat.
Not even slightly executed successfully.
Yeah.
Wolf Disco now getting hit by the stun there from one of those bursts. And it is going to be a full team wipe here for Perplexed as the 60% Pride claims another victim. Ryson is now going to try and die and get battle res in a good position, but Divine I don't think will be able to live to land that res, and it's going to be a full release from Perplexed, whereas Golden Guardians now, there's the Mass Dispel, there's the Invis pots as well coming out of the team. And I think that they have done it. I think that they have
got
through
it.
this, yeah. So, despite Perplexed having a slightly faster strategy in the area, like I said earlier, that 60% Pride is such a crucial pass-fail moment in this dungeon. And now Perplexed are going to be forced to fight it all by itself. Golden Guardians aren't out of the woods just yet, though, because they are going to have to skip it again on their way out. And if they fail at that, that will potentially give all of this time back to Perplexed.
Yeah, Perplexed just looked a little bit slow on the skip. Maybe it was like a slow Mass Dispel on the bursting. I couldn't exactly tell why they were just so slow to hit their Invis potions, but like almost immediately you could tell that they were going to get combated by that Pride.
Yeah, it did not look like a good skip at all. And that is something that,
now they're... Golden Guardians are firmly in the lead now.
Yeah, Golden Guardians are going to be making their way up to the Mana Storms now, the second of 4 bosses in this dungeon, fired up in that beautiful frog form. And yeah, Perplexed having to, they used their Invis pots earlier is the thing.
Yeah.
So they just have to fight these duplicators
What
now.
are they doing?
Okay, it looks like it's going to be a... Yeah, I don't know. That's such a rough spot to be in for them.
death battle
It looks like
res?
they're just going to fight these things. But they
they're
can't be happy about it.
They have a dental drill. Like, I think they wipe here.
Okay, Shine's going to land the battle res on Ryzen up here on the side, and now they're going to wipe, and then Ryzen is going to res everybody, was their strategy here. So it's going to be another 5 deaths for Perplexed, bringing them up to 10 on the board for a 50-second death differential. They do land the battle res, but I mean, this is just such a tragedy for them because they've lost all this time when they had the Pride buff as well. They're going to try and do their best to recover here, but Golden Guardian's certainly in a commanding lead at this point.
I mean, it makes me question why even kill the Pride. Why not just completely sack all the way? Just another 25 seconds of time lost for Perplexed, plus positionally they are in a terrible spot. Golden Guardians, what would you say, are a minute and a half ahead now over that of Perplexed, Dratnos?
I mean, even without factoring in the death differential, I would say something like that. Then there's an extra minute of death differential on top. This is a huge lead for Golden Guardians at this point in the dungeon as well, and there's really not too much left in this dungeon after this. You know, there's the Hakar wing, and then there's 2 bosses, and the 2 bosses aren't easy. Let's not pretend there's no way that things could go wrong on those 2. And it's not like they're even done with the Mana Storms yet, which is also a difficult boss in its own right, but I mean, there's not too much time left for Perplexed to make this up. I don't think. I think that at this point, Perplexed is really going to be relying on something going horribly wrong for the Guardians. Fired up. There's part 1 of it. Part 1 of the 5-part Perplexed comeback plan. Fired up going down, and the battle res is going to be used. There's still 1 battle res available for the Golden Guardians, but that was an unfortunate combination of events there that took him down. He had that Shadow Fury to try and stun the aerial Rocket Chicken barrage. But I think that they missed their first one.
He had his altar up. Exactly. He pressed it.
You can't alter back is the problem because you need to stay there and land your Shadow Fury.
Exactly. So he had the altar from the first 2 ticks of the chicken barrage, but he needed the healing from the altar is what he actually needed, but he couldn't take it back like you said. I think he has to just block there. It's not really. That's a very unfortunate death, but I don't think it's going to cost them any more than just 5 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, it is not the end of the world, but it is one of their battle reses, and that is a resource that could matter. They do have another one, though. They will get one more towards the very end of the last boss fight, but it's going to be that 1 battle res that they now have to play with, that 1 piece of safety net that is left for them. Here comes a pivotal moment to the dungeon. Golden Guardians are now going to be skipping down out of the sewer here, and there is still a Prideful mob hanging out over on the right-hand side. As you can see, they are all hugging left as much as they can, and they have done it. They have successfully skipped that Prideful mob. Yoda, though, has, it looks like, not skipped the dental drill, maybe? Or was he fine there? Yeah, he's going to melt it. Okay.
Yeah.
And they've killed the Warlords here, which is something Perplexed hasn't done at the bottom of the stairs, because Golden Guardians, remember, did this in 2 pulls rather than 1 earlier. So that means that they just get to walk out here nice and safe. There is now an Enraged Spirit that they're going to have to deal with, and an unfortunate patrol position as well for it. They'd rather have it be a little bit closer to that Night Fae urn that they are going to use to stun it in a bit. There's the Enraged Mask cast as well, as they start slowly backing it up into range of that AoE stun. Fired Up is now going to start the cast here and lands the stun on the Enraged Spirit, preventing its rage cast from doing too much damage to the group and letting them kill it off without needing to commit any major cooldowns here.
Yeah, Golden Guardians are in an excellent position here, dealing with this Enraged Spirit. They just need to make sure that they don't get a second rage cast and they don't have to commit any more cooldowns. So yeah, they get that dealt with. Now they have one of the Death Speaker packs. This is like one of those pulls that you don't typically do it with too many more mobs, and you actually do see Golden Guardians are electing to skip. They'll come back to this mob later. Fired Up doing a great job of getting his invisibility off, drops combat with the pack, allowing the rest of the party to either skip it one way or the other with invisibility potions or whatever else. And then the Mind Soothe coming in, being able to walk past this High Priest and these Devoted ads, and you do see Golden Guardians gearing up for a pretty large pull here. You have to be very careful of the Priests and the Hoodoo Hexers because they both have heals of some varying degree of effectiveness. The Hoodoo Hexers require a lot of kicks typically, but Golden Guardians do not care. They're going as big as possible. They say, this is an arms race here. This is the MDI. We're going to earn this pack, and it dies or we die. And so now everything is stunned for 10 seconds. You're going to have a lot of casts coming out of this urn. Whenever the mobs do get unstunned, triple Hex is being cast, and they actually do get all of the kicks, but now they don't have any more kicks available to them, and they just have to burn these Hoodoo Hexers before the second round of kicks come out.
Yeah, a lot of important casts there. There's going to be the Mass Dispel coming out, and they do have their 80% Pride spawning now. One thing they've done as well is they shackle Undeaded at one of the Deathwalkers from earlier. That is now broken, and the Deathwalker will be walking slowly towards them, although there is an explosive orb they do need to kill there. Shakib, great awareness, tapping over and taking care of that explosive orb. And so this is a cool little adaptation there. They made their pull slightly easier, but they've made their Pride slightly harder now. Yoda is going to have to deal with that Deathwalker, and it's somewhat nasty bleeds as well. They do use the Dragon's Breath to stop the Blade Storm from being a problem for anybody else, though, and they will work on cleaving this thing down with the Manifestation of Pride, potentially even taking it into Hakar, is what the timing is starting to look like to me, because that thing, it seems like it will not be dying before the Manifestation of Pride does. So the Pride goes down. Everybody is fairly low on health there, but they are going to run through the doors here, and I think they're just going to get onto the boss. And yeah, I mean, I think that Deathwalker is just going to be their friend for the next several minutes as they continue cleaving it down with the boss when it does eventually show up here. They are now into Hakar the Soul Flayer. No major cooldowns used on pull here. Looks like they're going to wait to pull the trigger on too many cooldowns until they actually... Okay, no, here they come. Right now, so with the Bloodlust, the Ashen Hallow coming down, one thing you can do on this boss is by delaying your cooldowns a little bit, by not going full ham on pull, you can actually make it so there are fewer of those Sons of Hakar out on the first Blood Barrier cast. And then, after the first cast is when you start going ham and you're trying to prevent it from getting too many more casts.
Exactly, so because the Sons of Hakar spawn at 20% threshold, but the Blood Barrier is on a global timer too, and with the amount of damage, if you just have an overwhelming amount of damage like the Golden Guardians are possessing right here, you're able to skip the second Blood Barrier, so you'd rather just pull the trigger on pull. That looks perfect. Fired up. Yoda walking on top of Fired Up with the debuff. They're trying to
JP also getting the Corrupted Blood too.
They're just completing the achievement, Dratnos. This isn't that big of a deal.
Yeah, it makes sense. They have spread that Corrupted Blood around quite a bit. It will eventually expire from them, but they are now heading out of the Hakar wing. Perplexed are working on their 80% Pride, and they will soon be pulling Hakar as well, but I believe that's one of the best Hakars we've ever seen. One Corrupted Blood, or one Blood Barrier cast from Golden Guardians, and then they killed it before the second one is extremely, extremely impressive. And they are now going to be
20.
On a tyrannical plus 20. I mean, that is incredible work, actually, by the Golden Guardians.
Exactly. So now Golden Guardians just has to deal with this one trash pack. Then they will pull Moizala. And then after that, they have some more trash that's on the landing that they skipped at the very beginning. That will be where they may get their 100% count. But this is fairly standard from what we've seen from MDI teams. I'm really surprised with Perplexed's ability to kind of come back here. But like you said, there needs to be some five-step philosophies for there needs to be a Golden Guardians mistake here. They are firmly in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, at this point, Perplexed needs Golden Guardians to wipe this boss. But that does happen sometimes. I think even if they miss a totem, Golden Guardians have enough time at this point to deal with the second totem phase. But yeah, maybe that would be enough. As you can see, I mean, there's an extra 45 seconds of death differential in addition to
that is true. That is
placement
a lot of
advantage in the dungeon. So yeah, Golden Guardians are just going to get started here. They are going to try and deal as much damage to the boss as possible prior to getting through that intermission phase. It does matter. On a tyrannical plus 20, getting as much damage as you can into this first platform will save you time at the end of the dungeon, but they also need to make sure they save their cooldowns, because they need to make sure they kill off all those little images as quickly as possible. And when they get to that final platform, they need to make sure they have the damage for those ads. That's something that, if they don't have enough cooldowns for that moment, could be how they could wipe to this boss.
Yeah, and one of the things, too, is that we've seen a lot of teams also allocate just an insane amount of damage to the ads and then just, like, not have a ton of gas left in the tank for the boss, and that costs groups a lot of time on the final boss. But I think if you're the Golden Guardians here, if you know that you're so far ahead, you may as well just literally just pop every single ounce of AoE on the trash and just have very little regard to the boss HP, and the boss will kind of die whenever it dies. because it doesn't really matter too much. As long as you don't spawn the Pride early, the Golden Guardians are in a very, very solid position here, assuming that they don't have a wipe.
Yeah, those shattered visages all appear to be dead here for the Guardians. That is the good news they were hoping for. And now comes the hard part. All of this trash with the boss here. They do get a big haste buff, but they need to be really careful. There are a lot of deadly abilities there. That Blade Storm you can see on the ground from the Risen Warlord will kill any of their Clothies that step into it.
Fired Up is just hard casting Flame Strike here, just trying to pump out as much AoE as possible. He knows that he also knows that their loss condition will be. He's just standing the Blade Storm. Will just be
his Root of Power is there. You can't leave. You can't leave the Root of Power.
It roots him. Yes, exactly.
It's true. So they are going to be able to get through all the trash there, and now they are at 97% trash count. The boss at 16% health. They will win once the boss gets to 10% health. And they kill the 2 trash mobs that are up at the top of the stairs behind them.
Exactly.
That is the final little piece of this dungeon. And credit to Perplexed, they have started with this boss as well, but there is nothing like enough time here to catch back up to the Golden Guardians at this point. All the Golden Guardians have to do is avoid wiping. They could even wait to pull the mobs from the top of the stairs until after the boss, although I suspect they won't do that. That's not part of the plan there, and you can see they probably will start sending somebody up to tag those in the near future. It's going to be Fired Up. The altar time is used. He's going to blink on up the stairs, hit one of those mobs at the top of the stairs with some kind of ability, and then altar time back down to the bottom of the stairs. There's the Ashen Hallow as well coming out from J.Bucko. As Yoda's actually taking quite a bit of damage here. Looks like he maybe has a debuff on him from that Master of Death ability as well. So it's a lot of extra damage coming out from getting hit by that. But as a Vengeance Demon Hunter, he is not going to have too much regard for it. Is going to be A-okay. Still has his Cheat Death available too. Muisala now 12%. Does end once it gets to 10%. Yeah, Fired Up is just going to be pumping the damage into the boss here. Does need to make sure that he doesn't get hit by the Master of Death, so he's going to have to leave. And a Shine going down on the side of Perplexed is not good news either for them during their phase. Yeah, I don't think they even necessarily got all 4 of their shattered images. Doesn't matter, though. They aren't going to be able to close this gap in time, as all the Golden Guardians have to do is kill off this last Risen Cultist, and once they do that, there's a 100%. The timer will stop, and they'll even up this series 1-1 against Perplexed.
That's right, Golden Guardians taking that victory there in the other side, and, you know, we talked about it leading up into the match as well, Zyro, that the high failure rate that we've seen out of Pride skips in Mechagon Wing, exactly as we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, this whole dungeon just came down to that, right? I mean, Golden Guardians had a relatively clean run, all things considered, but they could have made a lot more mistakes and they would have been able to take that dungeon purely because of how massive the mistakes from Perplexed were there, right? If you mess up that particular portion of the dungeon and that skip, you're probably going to have to wipe again because you've committed your invisibility potions, or you just have to take the huge L and kill the Prideful, but then you still have to kill the trash afterwards that you'd want to skip anyway. So there's just a lot of problems with wiping there, and I think it was Dradnos who called it, like, right before the match. He said that 60% Pride, it's gonna cost you.
Yeah, no question under that one, and you know it's interesting to see some of those timings as well as they sort of come into it. I mean, I don't know about you, Dradnos, from some of the keys that you've been doing, but I've been kind of spoiled having a monk in the group for that Touch of Death, because we get it just low enough to Touch of Death it. We're saying, all right, time the Master Spell, time everybody's, invis pots and everything like that. But these teams don't quite have that. They don't have as precise of just like a push and then we go.
Yeah, it can be really tough. I mean, there's a lot that needs to go right for that Pride skip. Not only do you need to have everybody hitting their invis pots at the right time, you need to land a Master Spell at the right time as well. You need to position every single player in your group such that the Pride spawns far enough away from where you'll be exiting the Mana Storms fight. But you don't need to get too far down that alley, because if you do, you'll pull the next mob that's further down there. So it's a very narrow range that you can be standing in. And it's not like you can just kind of position ahead of time, because all the mobs that you're killing have these abilities that zone you off of where you're currently standing. So you need to get there as they're dying, kill them at a specific time, land the Master Spell, which needs to be precast, and then everybody hits their invis pots, all 5 players, within a 1-second window. All of that needs to go right, and it is not easy to do, and we saw what happens when it goes slightly wrong.
I think that maybe having most of your dwarf racials there could potentially be better, and then you bubble dispel the tank. Yeah, bubble single dispel the tank or something like that. It may make it slightly more consistent, but it comes down to like where you do have those resources allocated to. That pull, I mean, Golden Guardians was able to do it with the massive spell. They just like pre-MD'd. But like you said, it's really hard to just make sure that it is pixel perfect like that. And then it's not that Perplexed was late on hitting the invis pot. It's that they were just, two of their members were just a little bit slow on being able to get that invis off like as they needed, and it just ended up costing them.
I think actually Shaq cut it really close with his Master Spell. It was like he didn't actually precast it; he cast it like the second afterwards. And I thought they were for sure going to actually pull through it. But Zara, what kind of highlights you got for us here?
Well, first of all, that was not delayed. It was perfect. That's a buck diff, as we call it in the complexity limit. But yeah, no, it's really only this and this right here, right? It was just slightly late. And actually what it is that it looked like he tried to use the mage invis there instead of just an invisibility potion. But I mean, sometimes that that extra slight delay in that invis can really cost you. And if one person gets in combat, we covered this in the Halls of Atonement, one person gets in combat, it's global. Everyone gets in combat, everyone dies, and that's all she wrote there. They committed their invis pots there. They had to wipe again just to get the death skip off so their paladin could res them, and I mean, that was all she wrote for the dungeon.
And it just led to the next wipe after that. And there's only just that little death on the side of the Golden Guardians after Shaq missed the Shadow Fury on Maleficent or anything like that. It was actually like a huge combo. I don't know if you saw it as well, Zyro, for fired up, triggering his Alter Time when he thought that the chickens were going to be over with, and then he had to like go in and like blink really quick to make sure he got the Shadow Fury off. So it almost actually led to a catastrophic wipe on the side of Golden Guardians.
Almost, but again, buck diff.
I think it's super weird. I think it's super weird to me that Perplexed is looking less consistent than we anticipated coming into the weekend. I mean, even in their first series versus Just So, they looked like really good in some of their games, but they just didn't look like as consistent as what we expected from them. And I think, I don't know, they definitely looked incredibly strong whenever they're having a clean run, but then some of their runs just like, they'll have just random problems happening, such as like that weird thing in Spires of Ascension where the boss reset, but like they were able to come back after that and like have a clear mind. I wonder like what's going on with them right now.
Yeah, it's still early. I mean, you know, I did have a chance to talk to JB about going up against Perplexed so many times, and let's hear what his words have to say when it comes to consistency with Perplexed. Thank you so much. I loved, you know, a lot of what JB was saying, you know, big fan of cotton candy, big fan of, you know, pixie sticks and everything like that. Love that,
Buck
you know,
diff,
dieting
you
skills
know.
going into it, buck diff, everything. So what he was going to say until the, you know, technical issues and stuff came in was that, you know, Perplexed and Golden Guardians have had a very long history together. They have spent a lot of time going up against each other, and you know, JB was talking about the respect that he has for that team, and you know, we've been looking a lot of times as well, Zyro, with how we sort of metagame or strategize where all these teams are going to end up in the tournament. And it wouldn't be the first time that we have a couple struggles coming around for a team that later goes into a very deep run throughout the lower bracket or later brackets.
Yeah, if I remember properly, one of the things he said in that interview, which we, you know, previewed yesterday when I did the interview, was that he had a lot of respect for them, like you mentioned, but he also thought that they were a little bit under, you know, people thought they were worse than they actually are. Like,
yeah,
they've always been the second best team behind Echo for the past year and a half or so, and people kind of, you know, downgrade them because of that. They've always been like right there, but just not quite good enough to compete with Echo. And I think, yeah, you kind of tend to underestimate them a little bit because of that. They're still like an insanely good team and really hard to compete with.
Yeah, and it's tough to be able to have that level of consistency, not only like dungeon by dungeon, but also just for one team staying in the MDI for such a crazy long period of time, competing at that level as well, Dratnos.
Yeah, I mean, it's something where season to season, you know, metagames change. People are going to be forced to play several different classes. dungeon strategies as a whole change. I mean, you have entirely different dungeons. People's, lives change. So the fact that you can keep like 5 players together and keep competing at the level where you're, like Echo does, right? And Perplexed, those are 2 teams that really kind of stand alone in the ability to stand the test of time with that 5-person roster over multiple years. And they are going to be up here in sanguine depths for Game 3 against Golden Guardians with a very favorable combination of affixes for time, but wow, this is a hard dungeon, and this is a brutal Game 3 with Bursting Volcanic in sanguine depths.
Hey, Perplexed also hasn't played through the lower bracket from the semis at all. So if they do get dropped down here, I'm interested to see if they are able to battle back. I mean, this is going to be a very, very close Game 3 just between these 2 teams.
Yeah, and another important thing to mention is that Sanguine Depths is going to be featured in the upper finals as well, Zyro. So it's both going to be in the upper finals, and actually it's the other teams. So Bay Alliance is going to be playing it, but we wouldn't see the loser of this round be playing this dungeon.
Right, a little bit of saying to decide who gets to go to the not the grand finals, the upper finals. I mean, this dungeon is probably one of the most technically difficult dungeons for most of the teams in the MDI to compete with, especially making sure you have all the stars aligned here for Executor Tarvel, the second boss. If you get a little bit too far into the boss, you start having those extra ads spawn, which can do more and more damage to your group, and you start running out of cooldowns to deal with them. That's why you see most teams pretty much commit either a Bloodlust or have some sort of Prideful buff plus the Lantern buff to make sure that the boss gets completely destroyed. And if you don't have all that available, that's when we see the wipes come in.
Yeah, no question. And, looking at some of those timings as well, 45 seconds, 43 seconds to be able to take down Executor Tarvold on the side of Golden Guardians. They love melting this boss. Game number 3, deciding who moves on into the upper finals to face off against Echo. Move on to Championship Sunday. Let's do it. The decider match right now between Perplexed and Golden Guardians.
Ooh, interesting compositional differences coming out of both of these teams, Dratnos. We saw Golden Guardians not playing the Ellie Shaman in the first game, but now playing the Elemental Shaman in Game 3, whereas Perplexed playing it in the first game, not electing to play it in the Sanguine Depths. How do you feel about the Ellie Shaman for Golden Guardians?
Yeah, I mean, Ellie Shaman does a lot of cool things in this dungeon. It provides a lot of extra healing on some of the really tough AoE pulls as well. And, no, a shine down for Perplexed as well on the very first pull. That is not good news for him. He's going to run back, so that's not going to cost them a res, but that pull is going to take them quite a bit longer than it will for the Guardians. One thing I saw on the side of Golden Guardians that I was somewhat confused by was right at the start of the dungeon, fired up, hit his ice block button when they were, standing around on the Lantern. I have no idea what that did, if that was part of the plan, and what it accomplished, but that's something that I'm gonna ask him about later, because it was so he cast his first aid button and then he cast ice block while they were standing there waiting for everything to come back. So maybe he had threat on something. Maybe there's some cast coming out on him. Not sure.
There's potential that there was a cast on him.
Yeah.
Anyways, that could
either way,
be. Yeah.
Yeah, it is going to be a resource that he'll be without now. He doesn't have his ice block available. There's the Mass Dispel, though, coming out from Shakib against these bursting stacks. One stack is not covered by it, but that will be easily handled there. So you can see the huge Fey Transfusion damage coming out from Lip at the start of this Prideful. There's that Night Fae Elemental Shaman, though.
Ooh,
on the side of Perplexed, though, Wolf Disco is going to have to use his ice block and his Cauterize, and it's not going to be enough to keep him alive there.
Swag just died too. No. This is so bad for Perplexed. They had the too many of the Engorge casts happen on those ticks. I think they're the names of those mobs. Too many of the Engorge casts happened, and whenever they died, they just exploded. Wolf Disco was already low. Swag wasn't super healthy either. That coupled with the bursting, it just dropped Perplexed low, and it ended up taking them out. Now they're 3-manning this Prideful. This is so bad for the side of Perplexed. Again, just 4 issues happening for them. On the opposite side, Golden Guardians has engaged Crixus. You do see some of the members getting knocked up by Volcanic, but it's okay. The Bloodlust has been popped. Please don't get knocked off the ledge. That would be terrible. There's a dangerous game happening there.
It was a little scary there for a second. JP is looking pretty low, so is Lip, but it looks like they're going to be able to get through this. They still have their Prideful buff rolling as well. Perplexed are trying to take out their Pride as well, and a lot of damage going out of the group there. Divine still actually on that Necrolord Covenant as well on his Demon Hunter. Pretty cool there. They are starting off this pull, but yeah, I mean, it was really those Engorge casts from the ticks that caused them the problems at the start there. For those who don't know, the way that works is those big ticks, if they channel their Engorge, not too much bad happens initially, but when they die, they explode based on how long they were successfully channeling it. And so it's very important to not let them channel that for too long. Whew, things are looking
GGS's health is looking really scary. JB had to lay on hands Yoda because Yoda hit like 5% HP. That was they're having another Severing Smash go off. They're just gonna kite this one out. They soaked every single orb the moment that the first Severing Smash came out, which is why they were so low for so long. But Golden Guardian's able to get down Crixus. Perplexed is hot on their heels for how bad the opening went.
Look at
for Perplexed. They're actually starting to catch up. I think Golden Guardian's boss was...
It wasn't
I
think
going
that they
right.
used Hallow at a different point. I think that Golden Guardians maybe used Ashen Hallow earlier, and Perplexed held it for the boss, and you can see Ryson was the top damage on that pull for them. After the top damage on the boss, which is completely absurd. 28k DPS on that pull. Now, it was a lot of AoE as well, but still... That, I mean, it's definitely saved them some time here and is letting them claw their way back here. So they're now something like 15 seconds of death differential and 15 seconds of real time behind Golden Guardians for a 30-second difference in time. Given how much went wrong for them, I think that they would be pretty happy to know that they're only 30 seconds behind.
I think the Hallow on the boss is actually a pretty large gain because it saves you just one full Severing Smash differential, and you're able to just kite out the boss as opposed to having to deal with any of them. Dealing with any of those orbs are relatively brutal, and then you had JB like trying to heal back up the party, doing the actual healing, which whenever you're playing Holy Paladin, you want to do as little healing as possible.
Yeah, of course, that's something that you get to do as well if you do have the Elemental Shaman in theory, so I'm surprised that it went out in the reverse order to how I would have expected that the Elemental Shaman team would get to use more Holy Paladin for damage. But wow, okay, Perplexed here, it looks like they are going to be skipping this pack with Mind Soothe and Imprison alone is going to let them walk right on by it and have the whole team. They're now moving through into the room here. And do they have the lantern activated in the corner? They do. Wow. So this lantern was moved from the one corner, and now it actually covers the other corner, and Perplexed are going to be able to get all of their stacks of lantern buff from fighting these mobs right up against this corner here. This is a new evolution in strategy that we are seeing here from Perplexed, and this is awesome.
This is
They're gonna get a lot of stacks out of this.
This is a pull that Blizzard tried to fix by moving the lantern because they didn't want you doing this, and now you see Perplexed doing it again.
The lantern in the other spot, it had the problem of like you would pull the patrol that walked into it. So
exactly.
But yeah,
I really like. So another one of the reasons that the Perplexed pull is a lot better is because you saw Golden Guardians, they had to wait for that patrolling Sentinel for so long. Where Perplexed, whenever they're skipping that patrolling Sentinel, they're able to just run it all the way into the room. They don't care where that Sentinel is patrolling because they're not pulling the pack back onto the lantern. They're pulling everything into the room. And so it doesn't matter, and they're able to just make a great use of that there. Now, there's a little bit difference in terms of routing here. Golden Guardians is skipping some of that trash, again, using that great Mind Soothe utility from the Priest, whereas Perplexed, they're pulling that Grand Overseer pack into this mini-boss Javelin room. It's going to come down to a little bit difference of Lantern refresh timing. As long as Perplexed can refresh their 10 stack of the Lantern buff, this should be fine. If for some reason they aren't able to get a refresh on that 10 stack Lantern buff, I would say this is a really major time loss from them.
Fired Up goes down on the side of Golden Guardians, though. They don't have an easy way to cast a Battle Res either, so Lip is going to die as well. He hits his Ankh button, but that's not going to be enough to save the rest of the group as well, as JB and Jakib are down as well. Lip is going to be using Healing Surge here, heading around the corner, and they're going to try and keep this alive, but this wipe is going to be a catastrophe for Golden Guardians. Meanwhile, Perplexed, they need to extend their Lantern buff. They only have a couple seconds left on it as they get into this next Lantern. Looks like they have done it, and they will keep their extra damage and healing here. As you can see, Ryson ascending with the Ashen Hallow on this pull, but this full wipe for Golden Guardians is a huge setback.
Exactly. I mean, on top of that, not only do they lose all the time that the 5 deaths cost them, they lose basically that full pull, but on top of that, they lose the Lantern buff. That Lantern buff is just completely gone. You do see Yoda, he's rezzing up JB so they're able to mass res, but they lost that Lantern buff. They don't have a 10 stack, they're not able to refresh it. Now it's going to throw the whole entire cadence of their run off, and this is absolutely terrible for them. But on the opposite side, this is great for Perplexed. Perplexed is still playing their game plan. They're looking to refresh the Lantern buff again. As long as they get another 10 stack refresh, they're going to blow up Executor Tarvald. They just need to be able to kill one of these mobs on top of that Lantern. The Quill Feather has like 0 HP, so it doesn't really matter, and it can die whenever the group wants to for Perplexed.
Yeah, they have more than enough time here. They're under no rush to activate that Lantern because they just refreshed their stacks at the other one. I wonder if the Necrolord Demons count for it as well. That would be pretty cool if they did. That would be a nice little way to get some extra stacks, as Ryson now going to be opening that Lantern as the Vestige of Doubt ends up going down right next to it. That will be the stack refresh for Perplexed, as they are now at 65% and counting up. Moving their way through the dungeon. Next pull will probably be fairly big as well, as they do still have that 10 stack of the Lantern buff. Looks like they'll be pulling back onto the Lantern to land one final refresh as well of the buff. Their Pride has expired, so they will just be working with the Lantern here. Meanwhile, the Golden Guardians are working on their 60% Pride, but their entire run has fallen off the rails here because they lost all of that momentum from the refreshing of the buffs.
Sanguine Depths is such... I think that's a great word to describe it. Momentum. Sanguine Depths is such a momentum-based dungeon due to the Lantern buffs. And that's why you see it's like super hard even whenever you're pushing up to higher keystone levels, is because if you have even 1 or 2 deaths, the buff is just gone. Even if you battle res the person, it doesn't really change anything. And losing that 50% damage amp can be costly, because then your strategies that you had prepared for no longer work. Perplexed is rolling bursting really hard here. This is incredibly scary. Mass Dispel coming out. This is fine. There was a lay on hands and a bubble used as well. But Perplexed, I don't think that's exactly how they wanted it to go, but they were able to recover it in a way that they didn't lose any time.
They'll now be getting started here on Executor Tarvald. This boss is something they need to kill as quickly as possible, as they also have those Frenzied Ghouls in here as well. But they have that 10 stack of the buff as well, so they should be able to make fairly short work of this boss. We do know that the fastest time this boss went down in cup play was actually to Golden Guardians in 43 seconds, which is incredible.
Exactly. So now you do have that Castigate coming out. We're zooming all the way out.
Yeah, we've got the nice center of the ring perspective here. Here's Swag as well. They do need to make sure they're dodging these tornadoes as well, though they do have some curse to sell if they need. Yep. Good dodge there from those tornadoes. And everybody is actually under quite a bit of pressure.
The AoE and the bursting.
Swag down. That's going to be their battle res. One is still available, though, but minor things are going wrong on the side of Perplexed. Major things are going wrong on the side of Golden Guardians. Golden Guardians are without a tank and a priest here. They are trying madly to run around this ring and kite a trash mob, keep it alive, keep their pull alive here, and not force Yoda to release. It does seem like they are going to be able to recover this, but it is such a huge time loss relative to Perplexed, who, even with 4 deaths on the board, are having a fairly low impact set of mistakes in this dungeon, right? They had those deaths early on in the
I don't
dungeon,
know if I call them low impact, but yeah.
I mean, I think they've only lost something like a minute to 4 deaths, which is pretty good. Pretty good considering. I think usually you would lose more. So I think they've done a good job of minimizing the harm of the things that have gone wrong so far for them, as they will be now spawning their 80% Pride right after the boss dies. They'll kill this 80% Pride up here. So this is a little bit of a different routing than we've seen from some other teams. Sometimes teams spawn that 80% Pride downstairs, and then they either pull it with the boss or they pull trash onto the boss and they spawn the 80% Pride after. But what Perplex is going to do, I bet, is pull all the trash onto the boss with this Pride buff. And this is going to be a really cool way to speed up the downstairs section.
Bursting is going to be very scary on the third boss, but they do have access to like a Mass Dispel if they want it. The advantage of getting the 80% Pride here is that you're able to skip all of the trash that is in that hallway leading into the call area. That most of that trash there is not super efficient count-wise, and you would rather play it like Lantern packs or whatnot to be able to just use your damage amps in a different way, and you would also rather do all of the trash into the boss with the Prideful buff here, with their 80% Pride. This seems a lot more efficient in terms of time from Perplexed, assuming that they're able to get this off. You see Ryson immediately popping that Ashen Hollow. Everybody's kind of stacked up into melee. I suspect that this is going to be due to the massive spell that's going to need to come through. The Rite of Supremacy, there's like a scream that comes after the AoE from the Rite of Supremacy. That's the most dangerous part. Swag was the only person who was even taking damage from that bursting there. He had his Dispersion popped. He had 2 stacks of that damage reduction from those orbs, and it was looking really good for him. Golden Guardians on the other side have killed off Tarvald here, and they're a little bit behind in count. I wonder if they're going to get their 80% Pride before making their way downtown, but I think that they're likely going to spawn their 80% Pride after the 3rd boss, because that's more common from what we've seen across the weekend.
Nothing I can learn.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different times that you can spawn this Pride. One thing you could do as well is fight 4 trash mobs and then spawn the Pride and then fight the boss after you get the Pride buff. That might be something that they're considering as well.
I don't like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of no great way to do this, and there's not been a clear dominant strategy of how to handle the Pride in this area. Even what Perplexed did, they were fighting a Pride by itself upstairs, which is something that it's a little bit slower than if you can find a way to do multiple things at the same time. But really, at the end of the day, in this dungeon, there's gonna be some spots where you're fighting something by itself. I love what Perplexed have done with this room, though. The fact that they came in with the Pride buff and they got to kill all this trash with the Pride, with their Ashen Hallow, with all those cooldowns, and they got good healing value out of Ashen Hallow as well because it covered a Rite of Supremacy and one of the Torments on the Naru there. That's something that is really, really hard to heal through sometimes, and the fact that they got a good value out of all those abilities, I mean, it lines up really nicely. I think there's a lot of good thinking behind Perplexed strategy.
Hey, something
and
that's
interesting
interesting
as well.
Yeah, something that's interesting is Swag popped Surrender to Madness at the very end of that boss. I don't think we've seen anybody die this season to Surrender to Madness, which is kind of funny.
Yeah. Surrender is it's a cool ability. I don't even, do they always play it in these dungeons? Okay, cool. Yeah. If you don't kill the target within 25 seconds of pressing that button, you do die. So it is important to do it within 25 seconds of them dying. Yeah, that would be an embarrassing way to go. It's kind of cool, though, because one thing that this strat has done for Perplexed is it means they get to skip that first bridge pull as well, because they're already at 85% trash count. They don't need that first pull from behind them there, and they just get to invis that entire section. So as long as they can avoid any wiping in this area, that is going to be the big problem for them. If they do have deaths in this area, there is a angry set of enemies between them and getting back to this area if they hit Release Spirit. And they don't have another invis pot for another few minutes. So that is going to be the fail case here for Perplexed. This difficult trash gauntlet needs to be well managed by them. General Call, in particular there, you can see applies bleeds to like the whole team from that timer ability. Yeah. Shine, Ryson, and Swag all sitting there with that bleed dot. It's not hitting too hard here on this plus 20 level, but that's going to be the kind of thing that when we get to our Great Push event in a month, you're going to start seeing a lot of players moving away from General Call before that timer is up, because it just does represent so much extra damage that is unnecessary in such a marathon gauntlet here.
It can also potentially your healer if you're not super careful.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously on a 20, they're pulling so fast that there's no way that Ryson's going to even if the whole entire party gets hit by every single one of the bleeds. But it's not preferred. You see Ryson actually gets hit by that bleed there, and he immediately dwarf racials it off. He doesn't want it. He doesn't want that bleed on him right before the bursting comes through from those cadets. The cadets are the only mobs that actually even do on-death affixes in this gauntlet area. And so that's a great presence of mind from him to be able to know that he just needs the
bleeds on the whole team again. Yeah, I mean, the good news is that this one doesn't matter as much because the Gloom Squall is about to happen, which means you're about to press your button, which clears those bleeds, which is nice. But yeah, for those who don't know, General Call every 15 seconds or so. Oh no, Golden Guardians, this is not what they needed to happen here to stay in this game. I think at this point, I mean, this is so catastrophic for them. They are wiping here to this Pride. They're trying to keep this pull alive. They're all hitting that Release Spirit button, but every time somebody dies, they're losing another 5 seconds now. They're up to 15 deaths here on the board. That is 75 seconds that is going to be assessed against them. 17 deaths now. And the deaths just keep racking up here as they release and die and release again into this prideful mob and the trash that is still alive. But they've decided to commit here and not just reset this pull because they don't want all those other mobs full healing. So after 23 deaths, they will eventually claim victory against those trash mobs, but it is a Pyrrhic victory.
Yeah, I guess that's a great way to describe it, Dratnos. They still haven't lost an insane amount of time compared to how many deaths that they have. On the other side,
115 seconds. 125 seconds, actually. The timer has just updated now. So 25 deaths on the board for the Golden Guardians. They are getting started with their boss gauntlet, whereas Perplexed are nearly finished with it. Once they face General Call here, they'll just have a tiny bit of trash to take care of. And I think they will spawn their 100% Pride as well. We'll see what they elect to do with it, whether they decide to fight it by itself, whether they decide to try and skip it, or whether they decide to pull it into the boss at some point as well. They actually have a Dread Bat involved in this pull as well. Doesn't seem like that bat was necessary for count either, so it may have been an accidental pull because the Pride spawned before that bat died. Divine is taking quite a bit of damage here. He is going to be okay as they keep on slowly backing towards the boss room. And I think they are looking to pull this thing into the boss as well. Looks like Ryson sitting on wings here. May have his Ashen Hallow available as well. And okay, they're going to finish off the Pride first, and then they're going to try and destroy General Call in 20 seconds or something.
So, for those at home who are watching, there's about a 2-some-odd minute delay from the competitors to see like what's going on with the enemy team, and like if anybody from Perplexed is watching, they would be able to see that Golden Guardians is like so far behind that they don't have to just like full send it on the boss with the Pride at 50% HP. They're able to just kind of do at least this right here, which is Ashen Hollow, just Call, Bloodlust the boss. Call is going to die in approximately T-minus 20 some odd seconds. So if Zyro's still in the replay booth, he probably should get back in here because his boss will die in just a second.
dude, that happens to me on this boss. Whenever I'm in the replay booth, I'm just like, oh yeah, they pulled the boss. Okay, let's keep setting up this replay. Oh no, the boss is dead. And Jack just asked me a question. Let me get back in here as fast as I can because that is exactly what's happened right now. In the space of me on this one long rambling sentence, the boss's health has entirely disappeared. Once it reaches 50%, it is going to be Perplexed, taking the series 2-1 against the Golden Guardians.
There it is. Call's held. Drop it to 50%. Victory is there by Perplexed, and Sanguine Depths just racking up the death counter in this dungeon. Unfortunately, on the side of Golden Guardians, just a couple deaths just beget even more here, Zyro.
Yeah, I mean,